Hyde at Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, freedom of speech in question. That's on Twitter as Elon Musk suspends a number of journalists. We discuss Twitter's current policies and how Musk continues to create some, well, on the fly. Plus, just last year, a tornado took down an Amazon warehouse in Illinois, why lawmakers are questioning a rebuild. And off the back of the collapse of FTX, crypto firm Amber has raised $300 million to tackle the damage done. Details later in the hour. First, foremost, well, muted end to a week's trading. Let's have a little look at how tech stocks were under pressure once again. It seems to be all about the Federal Reserve. The perfect person to talk us through it, Katie Greifeld in the house. What a week.
It was quite a week, and I have some bad news. It was an ugly end to what was a very ugly week. If you take a look at the past 5 days for the S&P 500, you can see we had a little optimism at one point. That was on Tuesday after those CPI numbers came out. Softer than expected, still a 7% handle, but in any case, then we had the Fed, and then it was just one line down since then. We're going to end lower on the S&P 500. If we break apart this index into the sectors, let's take a look at some of the worst performers. You had communication services, you had materials, then you had financials as well, down 2.5% or so. Consumer discretionary is where it gets interesting. That was your worst performer on the sector level on this week, off by about 3.6% or so. What's interesting to me is that it was Tesla and it was Ford dragging down that sector. So a tale of old and new. But let's break this apart even further and look at some of the individual stories here. You have Goldman falling today by about 1% or so. That's, of course, after reporting showed that Goldman is looking to cut up to 4,000 jobs. That would be about an 8% or so pullback. Again, that's according to people familiar with the matter. You had Starbucks off by more than 1%. That says news that Starbucks staff are starting a 3-day strike. And I want to end on some good news because it is a Friday in December. Meta Platforms up by about 2.8%. That follows an upgrade from JP Morgan, citing their cost discipline. Caroline?
Yeah, unfortunately, margin is still the focus for many. Katie, have a wonderful weekend. Can't believe the holidays are almost upon us. Now, before all of that, we were all kept pretty busy today. I don't know about you, but all eyes glued on what happened with Twitter after the platform, of course, suspended the account of a rival social network, Mastodon, which had tweeted a link to a profile that tracked, of course, the flights of private jets of wealthy individuals, including Elon Musk's. Then, of course, a number of reporters covering Musk, they posted screen grabs of the offending tweet and were swiftly suspended themselves. That includes some pretty high-profile journalists from the New York Times, from CNN and other outlets. Here's what Elon Musk himself had to say about that.
You're not special because you're a journalist. You're a Twitter. You're a citizen. So no special treatment. You dox, you get suspended. End of story.
Of course, this move has sparked a lot of questions. We'll try to answer some of them throughout the hour. First, we get our Twitter expert in residence, Kurt Wagner. Of course, Elon Musk talking on a Spaces, of which then Spaces immediately became inaccessible. And we couldn't do our weekly Spaces as we usually do, Kurt.
That's
just
right.
Talk to us about just what an extraordinary story this is today.
Yeah, I think it's just been a real example of Elon really managing on the fly, right? And he is coming up with sort of new policies. He's coming up with decisions about suspensions, with things that, you know, directly impact him personally. And then that is translated to the whole product, you know, in this case, within hours, right? And so it's just kind of a good example of how he's choosing to run Twitter, sort of how it's going to be difficult to understand exactly what to make of Twitter, right? Because things can change so quickly and so suddenly. I think that's left a lot of journalists in particular kind of worried or confused as to what might be, you know, happening at some point in the future as well.
If we look at the other side and think, well, maybe he is really concerned about his own safety
Sure.
and worried, Kurt, but ultimately deciding to make this sort of decisions on the fly, how is that affecting not only journalistic world, and we might say this is a bit inside baseball, but what about the advertisers? What about the companies who want to use this as a way to get eyeballs of the consumer?
Well, what we've been saying all along, right, is that advertisers in particular, they don't like uncertainty. They like to be, they like the platforms that they're on to sort of be boring. They want to know what to expect. They want to know what type of content's going to be there, what the rules are, how people are using it, right? So when things are changing overnight, when things are changing sort of drastically, this quickly, I think that upsets or unsettles a lot of advertisers because that's just not how they're used to working, and that's not what they prefer. And so I think from a business standpoint, that's where the concern is. If the policy can change overnight to affect journalists in this case, what other policies could happen in the future that could affect a brand advertiser who's spending, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars at the service?
And Kurt, some interesting news coming from another outlet about potentially Twitter still fundraising. Just briefly, what do we know there?
Yeah, there was a report from Semaphore, and it came out and said that they were raising money at the $54.20 per share that Elon bought Twitter at, right? And in some cases, this isn't entirely surprising. We were just talking about advertisers being a little nervous to be on the platform. There's got to be some type of revenue concern at the company right now. They're going to have these debt interest payments due in January. And so, if you're having trouble making money, making revenue through your business, maybe there's a way to kind of fundraise and make more money that way. So we'll see how many people are willing to sign up for Elon's version of Twitter now that they've had about 6 or 7 weeks to see how he's running the company. But I think to me, this speaks to a need of the company in search of more cash.
Kurt, always great to get your expertise. Thank you for setting us up so well. Happy weekend, friend. Meanwhile, let's dive deeper into all of this. Jennifer Greigel, Associate Professor of Communications at Syracuse University, also, of course, an expert in social media, been part of our discussion on Bloomberg since the early days of Musk's possible acquisition of Twitter. And chickens coming home to roost in some way, Jennifer?
Yeah, not much has changed. Maybe the gift, though, is that Musk has just made it painfully obvious that it's time to go, especially for those journalists that we were just talking about, right? And I don't know about Kurt. Maybe he watches World Cup, but I am there watching what's happening, within the journalism world, specifically with an eye towards the free press. And maybe it's a good time to step back and remember what that is. It's supposed to be free from the government, right? So when we're thinking about like free speech issues and, what are Elon Musk's rights, he gets to have his free speech because he owns this. But the rest of us, well, not so much, right? And, the risk, I think, has really proven to be that we cannot have Twitter be at the center of journalism. We don't want some type of, baron or, rich, kind of mogul kind of deciding who is essentially authentic, should be trusted, who's a journalist, who should be on there, who can say what and when. And, again, I think it's just, for me, it's the journalism piece. And that's I think, something we need to focus on more.
Jennifer, the other side has been discussed that other voices have been suppressed for years. And in fact, there'd been coverage of that, many of it being associated with right-wing press. What do you make of that, and whether or not we're deafening ourselves to certain sides of a conversation ever?
Yeah. I know, for one, I've been reading the Twitter files. I think it's problematic in how the information has come out and that not enough journalists have had access to that. So we're getting kind of like, pieces of the stories that are, they're kind of cherry picking, right? But for me, there's actually some insights in there. We have real cases into, how deeply connected the federal government was, and with the content moderation teams, that's concerning. But I know I was one of, maybe few out there raising alarms around what was happening around the New York Post when the Hunter Biden case came out. And it was a little bit of crickets out there. But for me, it was a case as to what is journalism. And I think that's showing up again. It's showing up again with, as you were saying, the suspension of, like Donny O'Sullivan at CNN and Ryan Mack at the New York Times. Like, they were reporting on this. And so, again, they didn't, hack any information. They didn't even compile this, this jet tracker, right? But they were reporting on what was happening. So what is news? And, can they share a link to a New York Times story, that was, sharing that information? Or was it because it was in a tweet? I'm just not sure. So for me, it's really a question of, what is news? Who's a journalist? And are they being censored on there?
Citizen journalism, though, has, maybe it's the force of the crypto sphere as well, in large part working in tandem with this narrative of Elon Musk taking over Twitter. But it has been extraordinary that in some parts you have had direct access to Sam Bankman-Fried via Twitter Spaces in a way that never used to be the case, and journalism, sort of the journalists being cut out in some way. Where are we going to go to for our trusted sources going forward? Does Twitter still have a role to play, do you think?
Well, I've been questioning for a while, like, are the stock markets decoupling from the signals that used to be coming sometimes from data sets like Twitter, right? But when it comes to citizen journalism, I think that's, I would say different than having direct access to, like, somebody who's pitching an investment, right? Like, these are what we call sources. They're essentially news material, and until it's vetted by a journalist, it's really not news. So we have to remember that even in the case of a citizen journalist, they may not be even identifying as such. They may be just somebody who is there and some type of crisis happened and they happen to be pointing their camera at something. They should still be seen as a source. And I think that's some of the struggle with citizen journalism, is that, maybe there is not the same type of ethical grounding. But this even gets more discussion, I would say, what is the role of a citizen journalist? More than, say, who is somebody who's working for, like, state media, for example. Yeah. So I'm going to just say one of the people that were suspended overnight worked for Voice of America. And I would say that we need to start remembering that that is funded by the United States government. So, there's, like, the free press over here, and then there's also something else happening on Twitter. And for years that hasn't been labeled. So again, like, some people watching sports, and I'm just over here eating popcorn being like, okay, US state media has been suspended. Did anyone notice? Like, okay, we got citizen journalists coming in. Okay, sure. But, like, what is their role on this platform too? So, but for me, we have to remember the free press is what matters. And making sure it's healthy and that it's not being controlled and kind of gatekept by some type of rich overlord.
Jennifer Greigel, Associate Professor of Communications at Syracuse University, thank you. And some breaking news to keep the narrative going is that apparently Elon Musk is saying Twitter Spaces is back, if you're missing it for those 24 hours or so. Meanwhile, coming up, why some US lawmakers are questioning Amazon's plans for rebuilding an Illinois warehouse that collapsed in a tornado last year. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Let's talk about Amazon, because it is planning on rebuilding a warehouse over in Illinois after it collapsed in a tornado last year. It actually killed 6 workers. It prompted actually an investigation by workplace safety regulators. But 3 US lawmakers say the e-commerce giant should be constructing it with stronger safety features than existed before the collapse. Bloomberg's Spencer Soper has been across this story, and in many ways, the whole tornado and the effect and the havoc it wreaked on families, it put into stark relief some of the issues about contacting people when they're in and working around Amazon, and indeed some of the safety measures in place.
Yeah, there was a very strong reaction. 6 people died at Amazon. There were more than 50 deaths as a result of this tornado. It was a pretty devastating event. And so Amazon was a piece of it. And at the time, there was a lot of attention on, are our existing building standards adequate to protect people if we are seeing more severe weather events? And so that was a big emphasis. Now, the latest thing is, there's indications that Amazon's basically, and the landlord is basically slapping up the same building that was there previously. And these lawmakers are probing Amazon with questions about, precisely what are you doing to improve the safety of this facility in the event that there's a recurrence of this event. But it is a difficult thing because storm shelters are not required. Things that may have protected these workers more are not necessarily required. They're like recommended. So a lot of it too goes back on the regulator side. What are they actually going to require? Industrial buildings to have to protect workers.
Amazon did say in a statement that they strengthened their emergency response plans and tailored them to meet specific needs of individual sites. I'm interested, Spencer, just all of this comes amid a macro picture where the pendulum kind of swings in Amazon's direction. They're an employer, perhaps they're thinking more about employees who want the jobs, looking for them, willing to come and perhaps work in these sorts of environments. And I'm interested in also the spillover effects we hear. Just the UK, their latest headline that we're going to get a strike. I think it's the first strike in the UK from Amazon workers over in Coventry. What do workers at Amazon think about all of this at the moment?
Well, it's hard to generalize, right? They've got more than 1 million employees, and you have people in these facilities who are not satisfied and want to organize. You have other people who are perfectly content and don't want to organize. We've had some, quite a few union elections fail after this historic win in Staten Island. And in terms of the UK thing, they're talking about striking in January. That's kind of the time of year when Amazon's generally, whittling the staff down a little bit after the holiday crunch. So strategically, it doesn't seem to be like such a bad time. And also the UK is about 1/10 of the revenue of US, Amazon's primary market. So I don't know if, even if they get a sizable number of people from that one particular facility, it's going to inflict much pain on Amazon. If workers really want to inflict pain on Amazon to get their attention, they're really going to need a big movement or a concentrated geographic movement that expands beyond just one facility. Because Amazon's resilient enough to handle even a big strike in one facility. It's going to have to be a really big worker movement for Amazon to take it seriously enough to pay attention.
Oh, fascinating as you sit there in Seattle and we see Starbucks staffing beginning a 3-day, 60-store strike as well. So this is something we're going to keep on talking about. Spencer Soper, great to catch up with you. Happy weekend. Thank you. Meanwhile, coming up, Bloomberg Businessweek's list of 50 most impactful people in business is out this week. We're going to speak to one of them, Tom Oxley, CEO of Synchron, who made this year's list with the company's brain-computer interfaces. It's backed by Bezos. It's backed by Gates. We'll tell you why. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg is out this week with our 6th annual Bloomberg 50. It's a look at people across finance, technology, you name the industry, that have defined global business in 2022. One name that stood out to us on the list was Tom Oxley, CEO of Synchron, which just completed a $75 million funding round because the company is backed already now by Bezos, by Gates, creates brain-computer interfaces, known as BCIs, that can stimulate parts of the brain and is seen as possible treatment for brain injuries. Tom joins us now, and if anything's at the cutting edge of technology, you are. Brain-computer interfaces, the way in which you can treat debilitating illness, the way you can transmit thoughts sort of wirelessly to digital devices. Tom, talk to us about, if you can, basically how this works.
Technology's been around for 20 years. The challenge for commercialization has been to make it fully implanted and safe. And what we do is we've figured out how to put the devices inside blood vessels inside the brain. It detects from the part of the brain that controls the movement in the body. We digitize that signal, bring it out of the body, and then we use it to control computers so that patients who are paralyzed can restore their ability to engage with their world through a digital ecosystem, which you and I take for granted.
Yeah, suddenly being able to share SMSs, WhatsApp messages, be able to order food online, do your bills or credit cards. Is extraordinary what they can be used for. The way in which you talk to investors, of course, having those conversations with Jeff Bezos, with Kozler, of course, Vinod Kozler, one of your first backers. What is it about timeframes? What is it about pacing that you talk to them about?
A class 3 medical device is a very long journey. So the time frame is long, but we've been at this for 10 years, actually. We've been in discussions with FDA to get this clearance for the study that's happening in the US currently. We just, our 3rd enrollment happened with the implant happening this week at UPMC in Pittsburgh. So we're moving along, but we've still got several years to go. The next step with the Series C financing is to launch a pivotal study that will take us one step closer towards commercial launch.
The people, the impact, the market, sort of how many could this help, Tom?
Paralysis is a very large problem when you think about it, not as a particular disease state, whether it's stroke or spinal cord injury or ALS or multiple sclerosis. Many ailments or injuries can impact the body's ability to control the muscles in your body. So we actually think there's 100 million people worldwide who have lost the ability to use their hands to control digital devices like you or I do. But where we're starting is the most severe end of that spectrum for people who are unable to engage at all with digital systems and completely depend on a loved one or a caregiver for their daily needs.
We're looking at footage now of just in the way in which this can potentially be, revolutionary for people who have lost the ability to communicate in that way. Tom, you're there in Brooklyn. Talk to us about, at the moment it's regulation, and at the moment it's making sure that you're getting the right test results, ensuring that you're hitting all those sorts of hurdles. But what about talent? What about where you grow this business? How have you been able to do that?
We are excited. We're going to set up in the Bay Area, and we made a decision to stay in New York. Primarily, we're setting up here in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We've grown to 55 people, and the people coming into the company share a love of New York City. So we've got a really interesting mix here of very passionate and talented people that are really loving being inside New York City. A lot of our investors are here. Our Chief Medical Officer, Jay Mocco at Mount Sinai, is here locally. We have Dave Petrino, who's running the Mount Sinai study. So we think New York's a great place to be doing medical device innovation.
Great to have some time with you, Tom Oxley. Congratulations. It's wonderful to have you on the list, CEO of Synchron, of course. Be sure to check out this week's issue of Business Week, and you'll get all the deep dive on some of these incredible entrepreneurs. Meanwhile, coming up, we'll continue to talk about, of course, Twitter. What's this latest ban on certain individuals, on particular journalists? What does it mean for the future of the platform? Jason Goldman's going to be with us, former Twitter founding team member. We'll also be talking about the future of advertising on the platform, the advertising trends and video commerce at large in the year ahead as well. We push forward with it. All that and so much more. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Caroline Hyde in New York, and joining us to, deep dive once again into the world, the extraordinary day, this extraordinary 6 weeks around Twitter. This time, of course, we're going to discuss the banning of accounts of certain journalists. Great voice, Jason Goldman, one of the founding members of Twitter, former White House chief digital officer under President Obama, of course. You've got an insider-outsider perspective here. And Jason, first and foremost, when we think about whether Elon Musk at the moment, many would say, yes, we don't always like the way in which he acts and gets there, but you can't back against him. He always gets things done. The success he has with Tesla, the success he has with SpaceX. But at the moment, is he acting from your perspective like a rational business leader or erratically in some way?
No, I think he's acting very erratically and motivated based on his own political preferences and the issues that activate him the most. This ban that occurred last night for a variety of journalists was motivated by a fear that he had for his family, and no one can doubt a fear that a person has for their family. But in fact, it seems fairly unconnected with the Twitter account that was tracking his jet movements. You know, there was no post from that account on Tuesday night. This paparazzi incident happened on Tuesday night away from an airport, and yet he somehow decided to blame this jet tracking service. But not only that, he banned journalists for even just linking to the account of that of that plane tracker. He would have been much better off just saying anything that talks about my family is off limits on this service that I now own. But instead, he's trying to formulate this very convoluted pretextual policy and presenting it as a protection against doxing, and it simply doesn't work because it's really about his own personal fears and motivations.
Jason, what's interesting, and I suppose what many have been upended by, is the idea that he bought Twitter because he's a freedom of speech absolutist, is the way he sort of turned it at the time. And now these sorts of movements don't seem to work in that. But what's interesting is the way perhaps he brought back previously banned accounts, like one Donald Trump, was he went on a Twitter poll and he asked the audience, and he's done it again. We understand, of course, he's gone and said, look, should I be actually banning these journalists should I unban them immediately? Shall I leave it for 7 days? The poll seems to say that, well, he should lift the ban. Do you think he'll stick to that at the moment, Jason? Do you think he'll use that again? Because he followed the poll previously.
He'll unban the journalist not because of the poll, but because he realizes that he's messed up in this situation. He realizes that this was a bridge too far, and that he's now going to try to make an attempt like, see, you have to follow my rules. But the outcry over it is simply going to be too much, and he's going to unban these journalists because he doesn't want to have to deal with this. He doesn't want to have to deal with this untenable issue. And it's true that he did present himself as a free speech absolutist, but I think anyone with a fair reading of the facts, even from back in April, would have seen that this was just pretext for him advancing very specific political views. He's now gone on to endorse a Republican ticket. He is very specific about the woke mind virus that is destroying the United States. And he's been silent on other important free speech issues, such as Chinese dissidents who use Twitter outside of China to coordinate protests, and the protests in Iran that are being done to help advance pro-democracy movements. You know, Twitter has been a tool of free speech and for democracy advocates since before Elon Musk has had an account. And he doesn't care about those issues because he's not really motivated by free speech. He's motivated by what serves his own parochial interests.
It was interesting. We asked our own audience via our own @technology handle on Twitter about whether they think ultimately the end goal of freedom of speech is being achieved by Elon Musk right now. And at the moment, they don't think it is, Jason. And I'm interested as to whether in the longer term, we will see that eventually occur, or will we see people push to other social media platforms? What was so interesting, and you referenced it yourself, is that a rival, Mastodon, seems to be having all of its links basically banned. Its own profile was banned because it linked to Elon jets. But now anything that people are linking to in terms of social media put on that rival social media platform seems to not be getting through either. What do you make of that, the competition focus too?
That's right. And I think my prediction for Twitter has long been that it's not going to die overnight, but that it will become more broken and more stupid. And I think that's what we're seeing play out. And that as a result, people will find other places that they want to hang out, whether those are public places like Mastodon or private places like Discord. They're simply not going to want to be on a service where the main character every day is Elon Musk, and it's simply tracking, you know, what new shenanigans that he's gotten up to and what policies he's decided to invent out of pique and anger. You know, one thing I would say to Elon about this and the very real moves that he's making to drive users to other platforms because of the anger and pique that he's pursuing these new policies with is, I know Elon is a big fan of Frank Herbert's Dune. It's a book that he's actually misquoted on his tweets before. And I'm a fan of Frank Herbert's Dune as well. A proper quote from Dune that I would encourage him to reflect on is, a stone is heavy and the sand is weighty, but a fool's wrath is heavier than them both. And what we're really seeing with users going to these other platforms is the result of a fool's wrath.
What's interesting is, as I said before, people's belief in Elon Musk. And we've spoken to VCs who are still very much supportive of the SpaceX fundraise that's going on at the moment, for example. They don't feel that they can bet against him as a leader, even if you say perhaps he's letting foolish mindset perhaps pervade his overall actions at the moment. Twitter currently, we understand there's reports out there that it's raising funds at the moment, once again at a $54.20 price. Do we think people are going to be interested in this investment?
I think it will get filled. I'm sure there's Elon fanboys out there in the tech world who will be happy to be in business with him for the reasons you say. Maybe it allows them to get friends and family in the SpaceX IPO, or they just want to be involved with Elon long term. I'm sure the SpaceX IPO will work out well. You know, even though Tesla is down over 60% on the year to date, you know, maybe there's a case for Tesla longs as well. The difference is that Twitter and the moves that he's making with Twitter are just destroying brand value. Twitter has always had an excess of brand value beyond its business value. It's always succeeded because it attracted the important real-time conversations among journalists, media personalities, celebrities, and so on. And he is actively driving away those use cases. Even before these bans, he's doing that. But now with the moves that he's making in the last 24 hours, he's showing that it's just simply not a place for those conversations to be had. Additionally, you know, Elon, purportedly someone who's concerned about safety and his own family safety. I'm sure he is concerned about his own family safety. But we have to remember that he also, in the course of putting out the Twitter files, has endangered the lives of employees who used to work for the company. You know, trust and safety head Yoel Roth had to flee his home reportedly because Elon helped propagate a false story that Yoel was soft on child sexual abuse material. I mean, that's deeply irresponsible coming from the CEO of a social media company. And I think it should give anyone pause about the future of Twitter's trajectory.
Jason Goldman, former Twitter founding team member, of course, former White House chief digital officer under President Obama. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. And interesting that Jason was there talking about brand value of Twitter, but also brands with value often want to go and advertise on Twitter. What does that look like in the future? It's already been perhaps questioned at the moment, already been dealing with some major brands dropping off the social media platform. What are the other opportunities for them? I'm pleased to say that Nick Buzzell, CEO and chairman of the content production company NBTV, is here in the studio in New York. Great to have some time with you, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
You're a man who has expertise within the digital media space, within direct-to-consumer, but also in previous life operations of Big Fuel, which is a social media sort of first digital ad company. And I'm interested in what you think of Twitter at the moment and what companies you speak to who are looking for advertising opportunities are thinking about it.
Well, thanks for having me. And you know, I think brand safety is really important. A lot of brands are concerned about the volatility of platforms like Twitter. I know that YouTube has had challenges in the past. And brands, I think, are looking for a safe place to tell their stories and connect with their consumers. And with the corporate responsibility of being a good brand, not getting caught up in all of the antics that seem to be going on over there. It's a wild ride for sure.
Talk to us when we're thinking about how a brand wants to interact with a consumer right now, and you're doing things with NBTV, Spirits Network is, and of course newly launched Golf Nation is what you're currently bringing the content and also the opportunity to directly come to me, who's viewing, and I can buy something that I like very seamlessly within the content creation experience. How would people react to that in this environment? How are they seeing that as a more trusted space?
It's been really effective. I mean, we're not a social media network, so we're a closed network, and we tightly control our programming and content. We've been called Netflix meets QVC, so we're creating a lot of premium original content. We're free to watch. You can go to spiritsnetwork.com or golfnation.com. Both of those channels operate very similarly, where consumers can watch and purchase what they see and have it delivered directly to their home. The response has been really great. Spirits Network has been around for the last 3 years. We've had tremendous amount of success working with large global brands, specifically beverage alcohol. And then we also saw that a lot of our data said that the consumers inside of Spirits Network like to golf. So we decided to take advantage of it and launch Golf Nation with the same idea of lifestyle programming with consumer shopping. And I think consumers are tired of interruptive ads and commercials, and they're looking for an alternative way to really connect. And big media, especially streaming media, is struggling right now with figuring out new business models and trying to connect with consumers where they spend their time.
Well, it's interesting you say struggling. Netflix actually had a pretty poor week in terms of its share price. It fell a lot yesterday because its new advertising tier, there were reports that it wasn't landing in quite the way they expected it to. Talk to us about just at the moment whether advertisers are willing to spend in this macro environment. In Spirit Network and Golf Nation, are they wanting to commit money to marketing?
Well, the beauty of our offering is that we can actually show attribution from views and impressions and eyeballs to sales. I think consumers are looking for a better experience. I don't think TV is broken. I think the consumer experience with TV is broken. Advertisers are looking for a way to reach consumers where they're spending their time. So we're spending a lot of our time on CTV as as well as mobile, so the connected TV universe. And we're finding that that's an opportunity for advertisers to get in front of consumers. The Netflix news recently was not only about some challenges they were having with in terms of reaching audience, but it was more about supply. There seems to be a challenge with inventory in the connected TV market. And so by creating more content, you're essentially creating more inventory, more supply. Consumers are still watching more content than ever. And I think even though there might be some challenging economic times ahead, advertisers are taking advantage of it to build brand equity, also to become storytellers. And now more than ever, advertisers have to separate their products in the market. So advertising in downtimes is often sometimes overblown. And I think people are still going to spend money. And I think, they're going to do it more wisely. So advertisers have to show as well as tell. And with doing it with us, of course, you can get it right in your hands.
Nick, great to have some time with you. Thank you. The
Thank you
perspective
for
of Twitter, the perspective on Netflix, we've got it all. Nick Buzzell, of course, CEO and chairman of MBTV. Coming up, crypto firm Amber, it raises $300 million. Still able to do that, but in fact, is actually raising the money to stem some of the damage from the implosion of FTX. We could describe that story, the contagion risk that's still there. This is Bloomberg. We're going to talk about the embattled crypto firm Amber. It's actually just raised $300 million. And the company's CEO says that the new cash will be focused on customers who actually lost money on the platform's products due to FTX's implosion. Joining us to discuss is Bloomberg's Hannah Miller, who wrote a great story with the CEO. And it's interesting. They originally were raising money to expand at, what was it, a $3 billion valuation, and then suddenly had to pivot and raise money for a very different reason.
Yes, they put this $100 million funding round on pause. They were raising that money in multiple parts. But with the collapse of FTX, they had to switch gears, and they actually raised $300 million to help their institutional and high net worth clients who were affected by the collapse of FTX. And this was raised at a lower valuation than $3 billion.
What about the growth or lack thereof in the company as well? Because this had much coverage when they first launched, ex-Morgan Stanley traders coming up, setting up, helping the institutional world get into the world of crypto. And, well, I mean, they grew very fast and now seem to be having unwind that.
Yeah, this company is going back to basics. That's how we're looking at it. They have completely ended their services to retail customers, and they're only focusing on institutional clients and high net worth individuals. So they're going back to where they started. Their workforce at its peak was 1,100 people. That's now being trimmed down to over 300. So that's a huge, huge step back.
But I guess unsurprising when volumes have come down so much as well. Did he give you any take on how the market's going to continue to evolve, what sort of clients they're going to be serving?
Yeah, so their overall trading volumes have shrunk. They had about 10% of their trading capital trapped on FTX when the exchange collapsed. Since that trading volume has decreased, that percentage has increased of what they have on FTX. So looking ahead, they're hoping that by refocusing, drilling down to just work with institutional clients, that they can have a leaner, more successful business. And the CEO is adamant that they will be here in 2023.
Does he think everyone will be here in 2023? What about, I mean, we've only got a minute left, but contagion still a key concern for him?
Yes, I mean, contagion is a serious concern here. They are definitely a firm in the crosshairs, especially after ending a high-profile sponsorship deal with Chelsea FC. So there's question of whether they'll be pulling back on other deals, including with Atletico Madrid. So all eyes are on this company in Asia. They're based in Singapore. So it'll be interesting to see what the year has ahead for them.
We seem to keep coming back to marketing and businesses' willingness or potential ability to invest in it at the moment. Hannah Miller, we thank you so much. All the world of crypto there. Meanwhile, coming up, as we head towards the end of our final edition of Bloomberg Technology for the year, that is, we look ahead to 2023. The CEO of SolarWinds joins next to preview the trends that will shape IT next year. This is Bloomberg. So today, it's the last edition of Bloomberg Technology for the year. And so we're going to look ahead to 2023 for you. SolarWinds is out with the top trends that will be shaping the IT space next year. Pleased to say that the CEO is with us, Sudhakar Ramakrishna. So it's great to have some time with you. And Sudhakar, talk to us about what you see in terms of, we're all worrying about macro headwinds. We're all worried about companies not being able to spend on marketing as much as they would. What about their internet infrastructure? What about their technology? What about investment in R&D in that respect? Are you worried about the pulling back and the brakes there?
First of all, Caroline, thank you for having me here. I'm very happy and excited to be here. It is true that we are in a very unique macroeconomic environment, but this may seem paradoxical, but the interesting thing is the need for digital transformation is actually accelerating. So to that end, solutions that serve customers with timely value are becoming even more relevant and critical in this environment. I'll highlight two real trends and reasons for that. One is complexity of every customer's environment is actually increasing due to multi-cloud, hybrid solutions, hybrid work, remote work, and so on.
Yeah.
And two is the costs or the budgets that they have commensurate to their complexity is not increasing. So in that, there is a unique opportunity for solution suppliers to give the best time to value to customers by delivering simple, effective solutions that enable them to manage their environments more effectively because they don't have productive time on their hands today.
How do you then, in this extraordinary environment we find ourselves, and with a lot of, I'm sure, competitors trying to woo those checks from the similar clients you have, how do you set yourself apart? What are the sort of key areas that you focus on that are going to make a CEO or a leader of a business that much life easier?
Absolutely. First of all, we have the pleasure of serving 300,000 customers all over the world. So we have our pulse to the ground and understanding of their customer requirements and dynamics on a daily basis. What is most important to customers these days is simplicity in everything that we do, not just the solutions that we offer in terms of their ease of use, but how easy are we to do business with and the business models associated with it. So for instance, recently we introduced the notion of a node-based price, which helps customers simply deploy our solutions without having to worry about how many network nodes do I have, how many applications do I have, and so on and so forth. So that just makes it easy for them to engage with us. So simplicity in everything that we do. Related to that is the time to value that it takes. Customers do not have 18-month pricing and packaging and deployment cycles. When they make a procurement decision, they need to see value of those solutions immediately and almost instantly.
Yeah.
So that is the other dynamic that we differentiate on. And then we build from there into remediation and automation related capabilities, all to unlock productivity at a reasonable cost for the customer.
And with safety as well, first and foremost, particularly as people are working in the office, they're working remotely, those make for more vulnerabilities. Now, Sudhakar, I know this is sort of a difficult, perhaps, question, and at times probably feels repetitive, but back in 2020, of course, your name, SolarWinds, was embroiled with the hackers that managed to infiltrate your own software. How are you looking to ensure that that just doesn't happen again and isn't going to be a theme of 2023 for other people?
Unfortunately, it has remained a theme in 2021 and 2022. Even though the spending on security has gone up, the number of security incidents, very high-profile ones, since what we were inflicted with, have continued to rise. And my belief is we all need to continue to work together in a partnership with the public and the private to deliver what I call a community vigil. That's the only way we can improve. No company, no matter how good you are or how large you are or how many resources you're spending, are immune to it. And so we have taken an approach of secure by design. And over the last couple of years, as ironic as it may sound, we've actually built a significantly greater level of trust with our customers in terms of how we manage through the situation and build secure by design principles. So that is what I would recommend to everyone. Transparency, collaboration, urgency are the key things to drive on a foundation of humility.
Sudhakar, great to have some time with you. Happy, well, holidays and New Year, of course. Sudhakar Ramakrishna there, SolarWinds CEO, with his outlook for 2023. And look, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology for 2022 in Bloomberg Technology. We're going to be back in January to continue to bring you the biggest, the best out there in terms of the technology, the innovation space. Do not forget to keep checking out our podcast. You can find us on the terminal, on Apple, on Spotify, and iHeart. Keep checking us out on Twitter Spaces. From New York, this is Bloomberg.